I'm jamming, and then later, the 50th time I've heard the song, I start actually listening to the lyrics, and I'm like, they say the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And over. There's like 2 lines to the whole song.
Yeah. It's like this new trend to have really short songs, which I get there's a balance here, but in order for me to keep liking the music, I guess I had to listen to it more. Wow, maybe the streaming has caused us to have shorter songs. Anyway, I don't really care though for the 1980s guitar solo for like 3 minutes either. Like that was a bit much. I was like, okay, we can kind of narrow that down a little bit, but somewhere in between would be nice, And like good songs, like Fleetwood Mac Deep. Like I want to hear about life. I don't want to hear about something dumb. Yeah. Anyway, those are just my rantings. So
I think you're good. You've got it sort of pigeonholed in kind of what's wrong. Pop music is interesting because it's an amalgamation of styles to then sell as many records as possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of sales going on, and like I said, streaming and hits, and the more plays you get, the better. I get all that. But sometimes that song comes around that just speaks to someone or speaks to you and the way you're living. It's like, wow, this is a theme. It's an anthem to my life right now. And I think that's what people would really like. At least that's what I would like. I had to really search for it. And if I'm searching for it, I usually find it in folk. Right now, folk is kind of getting big. And I think that's why. It's because it's kind of deeper lyrics.
I love folk music.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah. Yeah.
I proposed that question a long time ago. We were at the other building, and I was teaching a class in Colossians, and it was my first Bible class, and was not good. And I specifically remember Stan Lewis being in there, and he was very kind to me, and I didn't know what I was talking about. And there was when you get to Colossians 3:16, you start talking about music. It's that one little passage about singing to one another and all that. And I proposed a question to the class is, hey, do y'all listen to like gospel music? Do y'all listen to Christian music of whatever genre? Because I don't. Mm-hmm. I think it was something that I might even had said, well, I don't listen to that because I don't think it's right, even to have instruments or whatever. Which I think is a layer of debate. But it was kind of controversial because some people said, well, that's all I listen to. I don't listen to rock and roll or things like that because it's talking about drugs and sex and what have you.
People are looking for like good lyrics and things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, you want to have your mind focused on the good things or what have you.
I need a warm coffee.
Some more coffee?
It's not so cold.
Your Ember mug is out of battery.
It's out of battery. I could tell because I down that last drop expecting it to be blistering hot, and I was like,
that is the worst feeling ever. It was a Laodicea Sip.
Yeah. It was lukewarm.
Wow. Cold nor hot.
Cold nor hot.
Anyway, that was an interesting conversation about I only listen to Christian music. I don't listen to Christian music and have everything in between. And I don't know what's right. I don't necessarily think any of it's wrong, perhaps. But like the Greeks, we studied this. They believed in a concept called ethos, that when a particular series of chords would be played on the lyre or any type of instrument, music in general, that a sequence of harmonies or chords would actually change you as a person. It had the power to alter your personality.
Perfect harmony.
If you were going into battle, they would play particular songs or what have you. And I think to some degree that's, a little ominous there. I think to some degree it's true because there's particular music that really gets you excited for
Yeah.
a movie or for a football game or for, I guess,
there's pump up
war.
music, hype music,
Yep.
rain music, sad music, happy music, all in between.
I think I prefer piano and guitar jazz.
Really.
Just to have on, because it's not really stylistically directional. It's just sort of ambiguous.
If you could just have one. I feel like, I don't know. I like all music.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to all music. Depends on the mood I'm in. Some more than others, for sure. But
See, what's so funny is when people say that, and then I propose this question to them.
propose it.
Do you actually like classical music?
Yes, I do.
So if I put on Baroque opera, you would just dig that up.
Yeah, I think so. In the right mood. In the right mood. There are times where I put up my classical playlist, for sure. I haven't. I don't know if it's ever been like opera per se, like Italian opera, but yeah, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, the people that everyone knows.
A living example of songs that nobody listens to anymore. It's, things that were written in the 1600s or whatever that were meant for the stage.
I have a playlist called Movie Classical Classics, and that's what I work to every day. So at the end of the year when Spotify does its recap and shows you like what music you listen to most, it's like Caleb Stewart, modern classical music. Just like this huge amount because I've always got it in the background. But I love that stuff. And I don't really think about it, but whenever I'm working, sometimes I'll hear a song and be like, Truman Show, man, solid soundtrack. Or Lord of the Rings, solid soundtrack.
Gladiator.
It's on there.
It's on there.
Gladiator's
Yep.
so good.
Solid, yeah. So I do that too. Sometimes I'll pick a movie, like a musical that I like, especially if I need to get some serious work done or I have a certain feeling I want to get across on what I'm writing. I'll pick a kind of a movie or musical that goes with that. So, Les Mis. You listen to that entire, album while I write this.
That's cool.
And then that gives me about a solid hour and a half work. So it's kind of neat. Yeah.
It's fascinating to me, like how music ties into things like that in our lives. Like when I'm making videos for my other business and stuff and for camp, the first thing I do before I do anything else is pick the music.
Yeah.
Because it kind of establishes how I'm going to tell the story.
Interesting.
I like that.
Why don't we have underscored sermons?
I bet they're subconsciously done, but I don't know. I was reading somewhere, or maybe I heard it, someone talking about, like, the perfect speech is 92 beats per minute.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was like, huh. And so then I started listening to playlists at 92 beats per minute, which I'm sure you can take with a grain of salt when you type that into Spotify. It's like, I know that song. That's a little fast, but yeah, that's kind of where the subconscious is taking everything in and thinking about it. It's the same airwave, if you will.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there is a rhythm to speech. It's really important. I haven't mastered it at all. I'm trying to figure it out. My problem is I'll get real passionate about something, and then I will increase the speed because I'm passionate about it, and then forget to slow down. And so I'll write in my notes or in the margins of my notes, like stop, slow, break, whatever.
Interesting.
But
It's the same thing with music.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you're right. There is breaks in there.
Decellerando, pianissimo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you do an experiment for me next time you're in the pulpit?
Sure.
Can you program in rest?
Like
how music has rest,
yeah.
where there is no sound, right? Could you do that in your sermon where you specifically stop talking
For a certain period of time.
for a period of time,
Like
and
6 or 7 minutes.
What's the longest rest in music?
well, that's an
you
interesting question.
Open a can of worms there.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
am I? I thought it was like 3
No, well, so
seconds.
there's a piece of music that John Cage, the composer,
I knew you were going to
wrote
bring this.
called 433, and it's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of rest. It's a piece written entirely in rest,
Okay.
which is
So there's no sound?
Correct, yeah. The performer does nothing.
But I feel like most of the time in music, you've got a quarter rest, a half rest, or a whole
That's
rest.
what I was talking about. Yeah, that's what I
So-
was thinking.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
So what is that?
So
Like demonstrate that, and I don't know.
yeah, so like bingo, but don't do the
So it's
the
like
claps.
1, 2, 3, 4, rest. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4.
But the
rest.
time still continues. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's where the performer would specifically not for singing. It's because you're breathing. You can't breathe and make sound.
Yeah.
So it's
Challenge accepted.
It's inherent. We can't circular breathe. Some instrumentalists can circular breathe. You can do that.
Used to. I haven't tried it in a long time.
It's where you fill up your mouth with air.
I did my neck.
Okay. You can fill up your mouth with air. There's no air cavity in your larynx.
Or like Kermit, your neck.
And
Okay.
No. That's how. What's his bucket? The trumpet player.
you can't inhale through your larynx.
No, I'm not saying you inhale. You store the air there, and then you breathe out from it. So if you watch my neck,
Ribbit.
2 little air pockets right there. So you would store. It's how. What is his name? Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong. If you watch, he looks like a bullfrog. He would store the air in there when he breathes in through his nose, and then he would breathe out from the stored air there. I think I broke Justin.
No, that's not how that works. It's like, because you only have one. Imagine the straw that you push air through, which is your larynx. Like your larynx is where your voice box is. Air either goes through the larynx into your lungs or out of your larynx into the atmosphere. So you have to store air in the mouth cavity. Your epiglottis closes over the mouth cavity, and then you inhale into your lungs. And in that time that you take that breath, you're still playing the instrument.
Anyway, continue with your rests.
I believe both of you. I don't know.
Singers can't circular breathe because they are not able to push back pressure through the larynx. They have to open the larynx to fill the lungs with air again. And then there's all this, these, like, it'd be kind of interesting if you ever had a collapsed lung and they would put in like a pump for some reason, and then so you could just always have almost like a bellows. Anyway, that's why instruments are instruments. Like a bagpipe is a bagpipe, because you can constantly fill the bladder of air while going out the tone holes.
Right. I imagine every speech or sermon or whatever kind of like a song, or even a movie or TV show. The idea is the same, the beginning and end. There's ups, there's down, there's a rhythm to it. There is a repetition, just like there are choruses and lyrics. And so here's the thesis again, here's the thesis again, just like you would have a chorus. And so I don't know. I imagine it's much the same. But yeah, I'll put in a long pause here and there. That's probably a good exercise for me to do.
When I was studying British, like English dancing, there's this thing called Cotswold Morris dancing, where you put bells on your knees and you do handkerchiefs, and there's lots of leaping, and it's really elegant.
Sounds like something I'll never do. Sure.
But the thing that fascinated me was a thing called Border Morris dancing, and it's done with sticks rather than handkerchiefs, and it's done in a foursome, and you dance figures, and there's an idea of that song where there's a verse, there's a figure that you dance that is a verse, and then you have a chorus return. That way someone watching it can have something repetitive that will catch their eye. And so that there's a sequence, or there's a structure that is apparent. What's one of the best sermons you've ever heard?
I don't know. I can't say.
And did it have anything to do with what he was talking about, or was it?
I can't say because it was him.
I tell you for a fact it was not me. I can give you my top 5 speeches.
Okay.
Not necessarily sermons, because I guess I listen to so many sermons that it's just kind of all together.
Yeah.
But some of my favorite speeches. My first one is Charlie Chaplin in when he is, what is that movie? But when he is a The dictator.
Yeah.
The dictator.
He's just straight to the camera.
Straight to the camera the whole time, and he's just giving it. And he does the he's making a goof off of Hitler, but like saying truth, which is really cool. My other one is actually by RFK, when MLK, or right Martin. No, wait. Oh my goodness, when Robert F. Kennedy gives a speech when Martin Luther King dies. He gives a speech on the bed of a pickup truck, just out of the blue. It seems like I read that he put it together on the way there, and it's a really powerful speech about coming together as a nation. That's one of my favorite speeches as well. Those two are up there.
Well, you brought up something that
Bill Pullman and Independence Day. That's my favorite.
That is a good one.
That is a good one.
I think it was Neil when he was here, Neil Trumblett. I can't remember if it was him or if it was somebody else because we've had a few guest speakers over the past year. But when he was both teaching and preaching, he would be speaking to the audience. And then all of a sudden he would just go and like say a whole sentence or two and just complete direct eye contact. And he'd lock in on you.
Oh.
And he'd move around, obviously. He would do it with different people. But through the entire lesson, like he would do that. He would just lock in on somebody and he'd say something. And then he would pause too. And he'd just stare at you. And then he'd move to the next person. But you want to talk about like keeping me engaged. That is absolutely one, because you never knew when he was going to just make eye contact with you and then just say something directly to you. It wasn't about you, but it could potentially be. So I don't know. I kind of like that style. It was a little bit more intimidating, but it was a good way to just hold people's attention and
he's
engage
a very
people.
engaging speaker, obviously. Yeah. I've heard that as well, and I haven't tried it. I've tried it a couple times with maybe a couple people, but it's hard to do with 300 people.
Do it with me on Sunday, and I'll wink at you.
I will. I'll be like, you know what you've done.
I think that's fascinating to think about.
I see that
because there's an art in
there is an
performance.
Art, and I know you don't want to think of a sermon as a performance. Sometimes people don't want to think that way, but in some ways, it is, because you're going up there and you're engaging with people.
I mean, some of my favorite speeches from the Bible, Paul, and Luke specifically records in Acts that when he took his place, that he raised his arms.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, Paul often is speaking in almost an amphitheater, right? Mm-hmm. Where you would perform plays and things like that. And so he's speaking, and in that sense, it is kind of a performance.
We've lost that. We've lost the art of oration in the Roman times.
Mm-hmm. Put marbles in my mouth, trying to speak.
Demosthenes.
Yeah.
I love that line from My Fair Lady. Do you know? Are you familiar with that? He goes, speech impediment. He says he spoke with a lisp and he filled his mouth with marbles and began to speak articulately, and it cured him. And so he's doing this thing with Eliza in the play, and he's putting marbles in her mouth to try to get rid of her Cockney accent. Try to solidify her speech. And she goes, "It's not going to work. It's not going to work." He goes, "If it could work for Demosthenes, then it could work for Miss Eliza Doolittle." Great line. Anyway,
the King's Speech is another good one too.
Well, and he does that in the King's Speech.
He does that, yeah.
He puts marbles in his mouth.
He gets all really upset.
And and then the My Fair Lady, she swallows one, and she's sort of like, "Oh, I swallowed one." He's, "Oh, it's plenty more where that came from." But it's so funny how, I was looking at a study that someone had done. There's not really a manual of oration. It was just sort of an art that they actually went back to the carved records of bas-reliefs in Roman sculptures and Roman buildings, where you would see people orating, and they actually would have these gestures with their hands that would accompany their speech. And if you think about, so like go in here to our assembly and turn the microphones off. That's how it was, right? They didn't have mics, they didn't have amplification, they didn't have in-ear stuff, and so you would make you probably. We seem to have lost that art because we don't need it anymore. We can talk to a microphone. Yeah. I mean, but if I pull the microphone away, then you can't really hear.
You have that George Whitefield type voice. Where you have that. I don't. I remember that happened to me. Gospel meeting, bunch of people.
Mic went out.
150, 200. Mic went out. It didn't even go out. I got up there and it wasn't working. I was like, okay.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Can you hear me? In those times, and if you think about like Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address.
I don't imagine him being a very loud speaker. I picture him being very soft-spoken.
And I think that's why it was very distinct wording, slowly spoken. Like if you listen to old radio broadcasts right around the time that radio came out, and they would have these very long, articulated speeches that were very slowly enunciated. And it's sort of off-putting to the ear because we're used to just conversational back and forth, which I'm sure is how it was. But when there's an oration happening, someone in a pulpit, in a teaching position, what have you, talking to large assemblies, you have to have the architecture to be able to communicate. Like if you go to the old cathedrals and stuff in Europe, they'll have a pulpit that is high. You have to climb a set of stairs to get sort of in the middle of the hall, higher than everybody. And then they would even have a box that was built that you kind of walk in, and the roof would sort of be slanted away toward the audience, like at an angle, because when you spoke, it would amplify some of your speaking voice to this larger assembly, stuff like that.
That's what I've heard people say about like Jesus, Sermon on the Mount. Kind of
he positioned himself in the in the hill so that people could hear him.
People could hear or something like that. I don't know if that's true, or on a boat in the water, speaking out to the people on the shore because the water will carry his voice. Interesting. I don't know if that's what he was thinking, but I mean, it makes sense in some ways.
I've thought that was always miraculous to some degree. Where if you've got 3,000 people listening to you, and you don't have a microphone, and you're outside in the wind, you're on a mountain, where the wind is.
I imagine it either that way or just a very long day of saying much of the same stuff in different ways, which would make sense why the apostles are gathering kind of the similar information, but in different ways. I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to say it that way. I'm going to say this again another way. But even when you look at speeches or sermons from Jesus, there is a flow to them. I mean, just like anything. The Sermon on the Mount is a big one. You pulled it up the last recording we did. I mean, he starts off that sermon in Matthew 5 with blessed are those, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, and those who hunger. And then he ends, it's a long sermon, way down in chapter 7 with, if I am correct.
If you do the things that I've said, you're...
Yeah, it finished, it's over here in chapter 7. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them like a wise man will build his house on a rock, right? If you build your house on a rock, it will last. This idea of blessedness kind of ties back together. You're going to be blessed if you do the things that I've been talking about. And so, there's patterns.
I wondered listening to that live. It would probably be really off-putting to hear their cadence. I mean, let's say we spoke Aramaic and we understood what they were saying, or even speaking in tongues, and we could hear.
We had the fish in our ear that translated everything.
And it would be really interesting to hear their cadence and hear the master teacher speak, and how you can learn from that. But yeah, I think as a challenge, try playing with rest, almost like a song.
Just like I could,
because if you're talking, and then you stop, that would get everybody's attention. I think
it does. It does get people's attention, and I've tried it, but you know how it is. The rest is very intimidating. The pause is very intimidating for the speaker.
Because it's silence.
It's silence.
You want to fill the gap.
There is something about being uncomfortable and wanting to fill that gap. That's why people go, or people go, or I don't know, or like, or whatever. Those are gap fillers. So there's no space. And maybe that's an American cultural thing.
I think so.
That could be.
Well, it's interesting, too, the whole time that you've been talking about this, I've been thinking about it from the perspective of evangelism. Like, always talking is not what you want to do in evangelism. So it's always about listening, always about that pause of letting the other person speak and hearing their perspectives and what they are interested in and what they believe in. So, I don't know. It was just something I was thinking about while we were talking about this, because eye contact, too, is important. Of hearing the person, having them know that you're listening to them.
It's all a game. You don't want too much eye contact for some people because then they're uncomfortable. Like, oh my goodness, right? Some people are more so. It's just now you're just overthinking everything. But like, are you sitting in front of me? Are you against me? Are you sitting beside
me?
Body language. Too much gesturing, not enough gesturing. Boring, exciting, intimidating. You know.
You point to me when you say intimidating.
I was just saying. I was imagining someone else in front of me. I wasn't necessarily pointing to you.
I am intimidating.
Justin is very intimidating.
I don't know why. I'm squinting at you because I can't see.
Well, when you're 5'9", everyone's intimidating. So it's fine.
I'm only 3 inches. I'm a 2x4 width taller than you. It's not that big of a deal.
Anyway.
Shall I get you a box? That's Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good
Shall
one.
I describe it to you? Or shall I get you a box? I have to. I need to send you. My brother sent me this thing. It's at the Council of Elrond, and Aragorn speaks, and Boromir, shoves him off, and then Legolas. You can tell that it's overdubbed. It's like, do you know who this is? This is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and then. Keeps going like cousin of Arathi. Yeah. Anyway, I'll send that to you. It's really funny, but
good. That's awesome.
So those long speeches, and you could tell it's just sort of, and they edit it to where
everybody's just like staring.
Yeah, and then there's those shots of people kind of losing it, and you can tell that they're not focused on the sermon anymore or whatever what he was saying. But that's always interesting, at least in the public performance of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I've always found that fascinating. At least with teaching, that was one of the notes that was given to me is don't be afraid of pausing.
No, you don't want to be afraid of it. I'm saying it's a bad thing to be afraid of it, but almost everyone is, essentially. And some of I've had to work on too, and I guess I'm not very good at it.
See, well, but I always just think of let me try it, and then observe what happens. Where I'll stop talking, and then you'll see from what I would imagine is that you would start seeing people disengaging from their book and just. Is everything okay? Why aren't you talking? And then you'll have everybody's face on you eventually, and then you continue.
There's a lot of things that I've changed and constantly working on because you just get feedback, and there's different types of speaking. You're really animated. Oh, you speak kind of like a therapist. Oh, you're super quiet. Oh, you're really loud. Whatever it is, so you just adapt and change some things. That's fine.
I mean, I think that you've gotten really good at the pulpit. You're getting much, much better. Your thoughts are getting more mature. I mean, they were always really good, but it's just Renee gave me a similar comment recently. I did my class or whatever, and I thought it was an okay class. And she walked up, she goes, "That's the best class I've heard you teach." Mm. And it's sort of thank you. It was nice. It was encouraging. Because it might not have been an easy subject. I always get harder subjects like, let's talk about the resurrection.
Elders. It's like, the resurrection's good. It's a fun one. Hard one would be
eye-opening for me.
Yeah, elders or something. Anyway,
I had to do elders and deacons.
Yeah, you guys did a great job.
I don't know anything, and I asked a deacon. Anyway, but the idea of looking at the structure of oration objectively, I've always found that fascinating, because there's some, as y'all were saying, there's some speaker who'll just hold your attention, and I try to do that on stage, where, especially in Camelot we just did, where I'm playing a king, but then it's also, I have pages of monologue, I have to hold, it's 2-3 minutes of time.
I will say I feel like how songs have gotten shorter, speeches have also gotten shorter. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. In some ways, I think it's a good thing. But it's that's also a trend, I feel like, in modern day speaking or orientation, whatever. It's early in the morning. I'm sorry. Anyway, you know what? With that thought, and you should go open up your Bible and read some of the sermons. Probably start the big one, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It'll take you like 20 minutes, and it'll change your life. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Go so. If you want to know more about the Bible or you have any questions, our email is in the description below. You can DM us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're looking for a church family or you're in the Lubbock area, we invite you to come visit and hang out with us in Milwaukee. We love for you to find a church who practices the love of Christ.